In the past, farmers controlled pests by using natural and traditional methods instead of chemical sprays. They focused on managing the environment in ways that made it difficult for pests to survive. These practices were simple, effective, and based on knowledge passed down through generations. In 1947, the United States Department of Agriculture, USDA, introduced the Cooperative Extension Modernization Program, which encouraged farmers to adopt modern scientific farming methods. As a result, synthetic pesticides such as DDT and chlordane became widely used, while traditional techniques were often considered old-fashioned and less effective. Over time, many farmers stopped using traditional pest management methods and became dependent on chemical insecticides. This shift created a gap in traditional agricultural knowledge and increased reliance on purchased products for pest control. However, some communities, including the Amish and Old Order Mennonites, continued to follow traditional practices. They preferred natural management techniques and believed in reducing dependence on large companies and chemical products. The main difference between the two approaches is that extermination aims to completely eliminate pests, often through heavy chemical use, while management focuses on reducing pest problems by creating a balanced and healthy environment without harming the ecosystem. Copper serves as a durable, chemical-free barrier that can help protect homes and gardens from certain pests through a simple physical and chemical interaction. In the case of soft-bodied pests such as slugs and snails, contact with a copper surface triggers a reaction with their mucus, creating an unpleasant sensation that discourages them from crossing the barrier. Research conducted under controlled conditions has shown that copper barriers can significantly reduce slug and snail movement, making them a practical, non-toxic pest management option. One of the most common applications is adhesive copper tape, which can be wrapped around planters, pots, or raised garden beds to create a long-lasting protective barrier. When properly installed and kept clean, the tape can remain effective for several growing seasons without the need for repeated chemical treatments. Copper mesh is another valuable use, particularly for sealing gaps and entry points around homes. Unlike steel wool, copper resists rust and deterioration, making it a more durable material for helping block the entry of mice, cockroaches, and other unwanted pests. Some gardeners also place short pieces of bare copper wire into the soil around young transplants in an effort to discourage underground pests, such as root maggots and cutworms. Although this practice is occasionally recommended in gardening communities, scientific evidence supporting its effectiveness is limited, and it should be viewed as a supplementary rather than a proven pest control method. Overall, copper barriers offer a cost-effective and environmentally friendly approach to pest management because they can remain functional for many years with minimal maintenance, reducing reliance on chemical pesticides and repeatedly applied baits. Zinc is introduced as the cousin to copper, offering unique defensive properties for both structures and livestock areas. One of the most significant structural applications involves installing zinc strips along a roof ridge. As rain washes over the zinc, it leaves a diluted carbonate residue that discourages carpenter bees, wasps, and hornets from nesting under the eaves. Furthermore, the narrative details a unique method for managing fly populations in barns and animal shelters. By hanging a galvanized chain above a dish of water mixed with apple cider vinegar, a slow chemical reaction occurs. This reaction releases ions that disorient houseflies and stable flies, potentially reducing their population by 60–70% in enclosed spaces. But another highlighted technique is the galvanized bucket trap for Japanese beetles. Unlike expensive pheromone traps that often attract more beetles to a yard than they catch, a simple galvanized bucket combined with a yellow light source utilizes the slick surface of the zinc to trap beetles effectively and for free. Traditional gardening and household practices often include a variety of lesser-known methods that have been passed down through generations, although many of them rely more on anecdotal experience than on modern scientific research. One commonly mentioned example is the use of pre-1982 copper pennies in dry food storage containers. Because these older pennies contain a high percentage of copper, some people believe they release trace amounts of copper that may discourage pantry pests, such as weevils and moths. However, there is limited scientific evidence to support the claim that simply placing copper pennies in storage containers provides long-term protection against infestations. Another traditional practice involves driving galvanized nails into the trunks of fruit trees to discourage wood-boring insects. Historical orchard manuals and folk gardening traditions occasionally mention this technique, suggesting that it may create a physical barrier or strengthen the tree's resistance in some way. However, modern scientific studies have not established a clear pest control benefit, and unnecessarily damaging a tree's trunk may actually increase the risk of disease or infection. Similarly, some gardeners have described wrapping a copper coil around a stick and placing it in cabbage patches as a way to discourage white cabbage moths from laying eggs. While this method remains part of gardening folklore and local tradition, there is currently no strong scientific evidence demonstrating that it influences moth behavior or serves as an effective deterrent under field conditions. These examples illustrate the rich history of traditional pest management practices and the practical ingenuity of earlier generations. Although some methods have proven value and continue to be used successfully, others remain unverified and should be considered complementary or experimental rather than scientifically established solutions. The philosophy associated with traditional farmer Eldon Yoder emphasizes working with nature rather than relying heavily on chemical intervention. Instead of viewing insects and weeds as enemies to be eliminated at all costs, this approach focuses on building healthy, fertile soil that naturally supports stronger and more resilient crops. By regularly enriching the land with organic materials such as manure, clover, and wood ash, the goal is to create growing conditions in which plants can better tolerate environmental stress and minor pest damage without significant loss of productivity. At the heart of this philosophy is the belief that prevention is more effective than constant treatment. Healthy soil promotes vigorous plant growth, improves nutrient availability, and supports beneficial organisms that contribute to a balanced ecosystem. Rather than depending exclusively on pesticides, farmers are encouraged to combine practical knowledge, observation, and low-cost natural solutions to maintain productive gardens and fields. The broader message is one of self-sufficiency and resourcefulness. Instead of assuming that every household or gardening problem requires a commercially manufactured product, traditional practices encourage making use of readily available materials and simple tools whenever appropriate. This mindset values long-term sustainability, reduced waste, and practical skills that can be passed from one generation to the next. While some traditional metal-based pest control methods have demonstrated practical benefits and others remain largely anecdotal, the underlying principle is to rely on durable, reusable, and environmentally conscious solutions whenever possible. The enduring lesson is not that a single technique can replace every modern product, but that thoughtful management, healthy soil, and informed use of simple materials can often reduce dependence on repeated chemical applications and contribute to a more sustainable way of farming and gardening.